Okay, let's hit the big question. Who controls the games that you can buy? Now, after the last few weeks, we kind of know the answer. We know that it's the payment processors and the companies like Mastercard, Visa, Stripe, and PayPal that power them. You got the payment processors, you got the card networks, there's a lot of stuff, but here's the thing. It doesn't actually matter if a game is legal. It doesn't matter what jurisdiction you're in. If they don't want a game sold on a platform that they support, they can exert pressure. They can, and they do. And what that means is, well, the shareholders of Mastercard and Visa effectively are able to determine what kind of games you can play, what you can read, what you can watch. And the last few weeks have proved something important. A lot of people are really pissed off about that. Now look, they maybe also don't want to go and enjoy the latest furry porn game, but for a lot of us, it's the principle that matters. It's that we think Mastercard aren't the people who should be defining legitimate art. So, what's anyone actually doing about this? What are you doing? What are we doing? What's the path forward? And as if there's not enough BS going on, guess what? A lot of hacks happen. As an example, British Telecom being hacked, which actually exposed data of my partner and family. And it is exactly why I use today's sponsor, Incogni. It's because they're our only way to fight back. And that's because whenever data leaks, data brokers harvest it up and they sell it on. If you ever wondered how spam callers get your number, it's very often that, data brokers. And Incogni solves this problem by automating the legal work that you would otherwise have to do. And if you join at incogni.com/Bellular News, you'll get 60% off an annual plan. And here's how it works. You enter your info, and that's it. It's literally that easy. They take it from there. Now, you've got a legal right to get your data taken down, but that involves, well, paperwork. It takes hours and it's not permanent. What Incogni does is automatically scan the brokers, send takedown requests, and add you to suppression lists. It does it all automatically, and they constantly rescan so your data is actually kept down. Take a look at my data. My takedown data, not the real stuff. 206 requests sent, 12 in progress, 194 completed, and I'm on 23 suppression lists. That's pretty damn legit peace of mind. At incogni.com/Bellular News, you get 60% off an annual plan, so check them out using my link today. First up today, there's the pressure these companies currently face, the pressure from you. Now, do you remember the recent Mastercard thing that they responded to, right? They said they were responding to recent headlines. Now, those headlines appeared because you made enough noise. Developers raised hell, the press picked it up worldwide, and just get a load of these numbers, right? Nearly 234,000 signatures on the change.org petition, which, is really where change happens. Obviously, that won't have legal weight, but it does send a fairly clear message about how widespread the anger is. And it is global as well. Industry bodies from Germany to Japan are urging stores to defend their legal sales against these payment processor tactics. Some companies are also deciding that opposition is actually just good business. GOG are one example there, so they didn't face any pressure to remove games, but of course, never waste a good crisis. They worked out that they can just give away a bundle of mature games to 1 million people over the weekend, make a nice big statement, and of course, get a whole bunch of PR, get a bunch of press. And their argument is that this censorship is, to them, no different from DRM or any other form of corporate control over your media. So summing it all up, consumers, stores, press have raised absolute goddamn hell. And that support actually matters now that the industry has started to look for solutions. Now, before we get to the industry efforts, we gotta talk about America, because people are pointing to this executive order saying that it's kind of the solution to our problem here, basically saying it will save gaming from payment processor censorship. Now, let's actually take a look at what it does. And overall, you see that it targets, quote, politicized or unlawful debanking. And the way this executive order is framed, especially like the first sort of paragraph or 2 paragraphs, is basically all about reactions to January 6th and to Operation Checkpoint. So essentially, it's targeting cases where banks deny services based on political beliefs or religious views. Basically, the administration is protecting people flagged for shopping at Cabela's, gun shops, energy companies, but very much not video games, not adult games. Those are not mentioned at all. Now, gaming Twitter in some spaces has kind of just taken this to mean that Mastercard can't censor anymore, but that's quite simply not the case if you actually read the executive order, because there's a key phrase, and I'm going to read it for you. Banking decisions must be based on, quote, individualized, objective, and risk-based analyses. So, here's the thing. If you were to ask Mastercard, like their response to this, they would say that that's what they're already doing. So as I see it, this order kind of changes nothing for adult games. And the reason why is that payment processors are not banning content for political reasons. They're quite simply saying that it's a business risk. And under this order, them doing something, accepting business or not accepting business because they see it as a risk, is perfectly fine and something that they can do. Basically, what would happen is Mastercard would look at your adult game, they would write a report, they'd talk about high chargeback rates, reputational risk, legal liability concerns, and boom, there you go. Objective, risk-based, individualized. So essentially, this order protects, quote, lawful business activities. But payment processors never said that adult games were illegal. That's not the claim they're making. They just said that they were risky. It's a different argument. It's a different problem. And this executive order is not targeted towards this specific problem. Gaming Twitter might be celebrating, but while they are, Mastercard's lawyers will literally be laughing because with the wording of this order, they now have a clear pathway to prove compliance and, of course, to earn some money for writing up some legal reports. So this is not a win. This quite simply is the status quo with extra paperwork. We shouldn't really expect this to be particularly relevant to today's story because it's not really a story about political speech. So with that mentioned, let's dive into the efforts that are being made on this specific issue by the games industry. There are people within these systems who have got small amounts of collective power, and they're equally frustrated. Across the industry, we're seeing trade bodies leveling complaints. Now, not all of these carry the same weight, and very few will be as radical as, say some players and developers would like. They're not going to demand total free expression or an end to all censorship. Take as one example, the International Game Developers Association. You may know them from a little event they run called GDC. Now, they say they're, quote, seriously alarmed at the pressure on stores from payment providers. And they essentially frame the whole thing as censorship. And they're particularly strong in this because it's impacting LGBTQ minority developers in an outsized way. Now, obviously, they can't just say, hello, we're the international game developers, go change your policies. They just literally can't do that. They don't have that pull, but they can warn about impact. So, what do they ask for? Well, they basically ask for transparency from everyone, for clear frameworks for approval, appeals processes from stores, and from payment providers. Somehow, I think the idea that Mastercard could be judging something's artistic value is, not really what they want. Now, they're pointing some developers towards adult industry compliant payment processors. The sketchy ones who will do like porn subscriptions and stuff. And they're basically telling both devs and players to reach out to register your displeasure directly with payment processors, which of course we know people are already doing. So with all that going on, the onus is now on the payment processors to change their policies. However, that's probably not something we can rely on, so what about a more structural solution? One with real teeth? Well, that's where we go to the United Kingdom's UK. Their statement's fairly interesting, and they're a developer trade body that just joined the new UK Video Games Council. Basically, they don't want to openly campaign against UK government policy, which is, a little bit awkward given the whole Online Safety Act that's kind of tearing up the internet right now. So they can't argue for a game like No Mercy on artistic grounds because, well, it's theoretically illegal. So their solution is, you're going to be shocked, guys. It's something we've had for years. Age ratings. Basically, the PEGI classification should be enough for payment processors, stores, and the public to make an informed choice. Which does seem sensible to me. It's almost as if this entire thing is a completely stupid waste of time, and we've already got structures to solve this problem, like age ratings. And the scope of those systems already covers for, quote, adult or experimental content. So, if a game has been reviewed and given clear context, payment providers should be comfortable that there's no illegal aspect. So effectively, as long as a game is rated, it should be sold. And logistically, that already exists. Which, to be honest with you, makes this entire story all the more bizarre, because it really does sound like a complete non-issue. But you probably won't be surprised that that's not all the entire story. So, PEGI ratings, they exist. They are actually legally enforceable, but the age challenge usually happens at purchase, at least say for physical games. And the bigger problem here is online digital stores where hundreds of games are released every single day. But here's the thing, we've literally already solved that problem. The IARC. This essentially brings together a bunch of game rating boards. You've got the ESRB, you've got PEGI, you've got Germany's USK, and under their free system, developers submit games to online stores. Now, the content survey then automatically assigns a generic rating, and then it matches categories for each regional board. And this does actually matter because, say, Germany and Brazil don't allow for unclassified game sales. That's part of another fun Protect the Kids Act called the German Youth Protection Act that came in 2016, where any game in Germany has to be rated by that ratings board. Now, on Steam, that means that unrated games get geo-blocked. So, yeah, turns out for our friends in Germany, you guys are just missing loads of unrated games. Now, this is mostly just impacting older games from before any of these systems existed. But Yuki's argument here is simple, right? If this legally enforceable system exists, payment processors should trust it, right? Why do they have to bother just stepping into this entire thing? Is it literally just they're so afraid that a group like Collective Shout can create bad headlines that they're just being way oversensitive? Because in theory, this exists and it should protect everyone. Now, it's not perfect. There are issues. It still does concentrate power with bigger stores who can implement these systems easily. It does increase bureaucracy for indie devs who only distribute to a handful of people. And there's the worst case scenario, something like Steam China, essentially a region-locked storefront where only compliant games exist, because IARC doesn't necessarily distinguish between content that's illegal in the UK, but legal everywhere else. And there are risks to this, as pointed out by Bruno Dias and other writers. Basically, age ratings create a binary from a gray area. They give payment processors a clear threshold to target, and they could simply just refuse to process any adult-only sale. Just like, as an example, US physical stores refusing to stock adult-only games. Or they could go and demand removal of all 18-plus games per their policy, which of course, right now we do know is literally possible. And that's because Steam does work with IARC. Their games have got these ratings, and the biggest PC gaming store still had to delist legal content. Again, the reason why is that payment processors wanted it gone, even though all this age rating stuff should basically solve the problem. But here's the takeaway. Germany's law changed, and then every company had to comply, just like we're seeing with the UK's OSA. And as long as companies can suppress customers based on these policies, they obviously will. And that is why so many in the United States have suggested that audiences support a law to change that. As if this video couldn't get any sexier, many people are pointing to S.401, the Fair Access to Banking Act. Fun little thing, and was recently reintroduced to the US legislature. It's designed to prevent payment processors from refusing funds for arms sales, energy companies, or crypto. And I don't know, I guess hopefully video games as well. Basically, each industry faced public pressure. Payment processors and banks were refusing service after protests. And obviously, well, the gaming audience looked at all of this and saw a completely obvious opportunity. Any law mandating that banks only refuse illegal transactions would theoretically cover adult games. Are legal, which, if I'm honest, is a rather noble reading of the bill, but reality is a little bit different. Payment processors can still apply, quote, risk-based standards, which, is quite a lot of wiggle room. Essentially, they'd be able to reject customers and transactions. They would just need stricter terms and transparency about why. Now, for the bill's intended targets with, expensive legal teams, right? All the lawyers that are backing up the guns, well, this gives ammunition to overturn those prohibitions. But for someone making a tiny indie smut game, probably wouldn't help the same way. But more importantly, it does kind of miss the point. If these games are considered pornographic, then, they're more likely to be legislated out of existence. And that's especially because current US government policy does expand that definition, not protect it. So, while this may seem like protection for games, gotta be real with you, it is a Hail Mary. And because a Hail Mary isn't exactly something we can trust, well, the best thing we can do is probably to keep listening to the impacted developers, so we can actually see what the hell's going on. So what do these devs want? Well, they want support from players. Hardly surprising. They want more calls. They want more pressure on payment processors. It's one of the reasons why, honestly, I'm doing this video, right? We want to cover what's actually going on, what you guys can actually do, and I guess in a way, keep the whole story alive. Now, things were not necessarily good before, but they were functional. Steam and itch respected their work, right? Even if it is for, shall we say, select audiences of connoisseurs. Minor sarcasm alert. Now, as for the groups who are agitating all of this stuff, like say Collective Shout, Well, they've been opposed to what these people have been making for a very long time indeed, and they're using decades-old playbooks, just they're doing it with modern tools. Targeting creators for making works that they personally don't want to see is essentially their MO. This sort of opposition is not a brand new thing. You know, we had the Satanic Panic. We had all of the video game violence stuff that happened, like, was it sort of early 2000s and stuff? Remember the Mass Effect Fox controversy? It's just the same thing happening again. The difference is impact, because, well, social media, headlines, all of that stuff, I think is quite a bit more powerful now. That does mean that the likes of Mastercard are getting quite conservative. Not in any sort of, ideological sense. I mean conservative in terms of risk. They don't want it. But here's the thing I want you to remember, because I've seen lots of comments that are basically saying, look, I don't play games like this. Why the hell should I care that, a bunch of perv games could go off Steam? Well, it's basically because, what if the standards change? What if this becomes something that is fairly normal and, the sorts of things that are going on today to protect a certain category of games? Well, what if we actually lose and those games lose out? But the likes of Collective Shout and the probably hundreds upon hundreds of other similar groups, well, just go for the next target, the next bit of low-hanging fruit. And we do this thing again. You run that experiment over 10 years or 20 years, what is the direction of travel? I think that is what actually worries people, and that's why we want to nip this in the bud. That's why we want to be galvanized here. Why we don't just focus on the games we play, why we actually focus on the principles, and how principles underpinning our medium are under attack. The least that we can do is argue in their favor when we can. That's why this video exists. Of course, if you've been in contact with the good folks over at Mastercard or Visa, let us know what they've told you. And if you want to see how Valve kind of forced a statement out of Mastercard, well, you should watch this video next.